Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about, is spiritual initiation really necessary? So I often have people asking me if they can be initiated into Kriya Yoga. So I teach Kriya Yoga, the household lineage of Panchanan Bhattacharya, and I can initiate people into that path, that formal Kriya Yoga path, right? But what I often counsel people, or what I tell people, is that the initiation ceremony, if you will, is not necessarily a prerequisite to success in Kriya Yoga. And the reason I say this is because there's the preconceived notion out there that if you're not initiated into Kriya Yoga, you will not have success in the path. And this is completely wrong. And the reason this is wrong is because that's not the way it works. So people have an assumption that once you're initiated, somehow you're empowered, right? So the initiation or the transmission from the guru or the teacher to the student is what empowers the student to do well, to have success in the practice. And that isn't true. What it is it is the student that is actually doing the work, that able to follow the instructions, trying to learn the practices, right? To apply the skills that they develop, to get some traction inside and to start to have success with some of the practices. And the thing about spirituality and Kriya Yoga and other yogic paths is they tend to deify the teacher, right? So we see this with Lahiri Mahashaya, right? Sort of seeing him, many people have talked about him as sort of being a divine being and that kind of thing, and I'm not disputing that. But what people believe is that you need that guru's intercession to make any changes in your life, to make spiritual development. And nobody else can do your work, right? So, and this is, I think, a fundamental misunderstanding of Lahiri's message and his teachings, is that even if you look at the Garland of Verses, right? So the letters that were sent back and forth between Lahiri and his students, and his students would be asking for particular insights or questions about practices, and they would say, oh, I'm doing this number of Kriya, I'm doing blah, blah, blah. And usually Lahiri's answer was like, good, keep doing it, or makes these little modifications. So he's basically giving his advice based on his experience and what the student was saying to help guide the student. But he wasn't empowering their work. Like, he didn't go there and do their kriyas for them, right? He didn't say, let me remove the impediments for you. And so Paramhansa Yogananda, who came later with sort of creating many stories about Lahiri and saying, oh yeah, he was this divine, super being and had these super effects on people. Now, I'm not saying that Lahiri didn't have effect on his students, but the thing is that his students would have to tune into Lahiri's energy to get that. There's no teacher who's able to come in and basically force you to do things, right? So when people think about transmission of initiation, like the transmission from the guru to the student, yes, there's a subtle energetic interplay between the student and teacher, definitely. But it is very much contingent upon the student being in resonance with the teacher, right? Or at least with the practices. And so that's really what our approach at Modern Kriya is about. It isn't about saying, hey, let me transmit this, teaching to you. It is really about, here's the practices, here's the way to do them. Start to experiment and work through them. And then where you start to have trouble, let's have a dialogue, let's have a connection about it so we can kind of find out some things that can help you through it, right? So it's really about providing support and guidance to the student. It is not about empowering the student with your transmission, right? Because I've seen some very, very powerful spiritual teachers in the past who definitely, you get the transmission, like boom, you're barraged with it, right? But a lot of the times the students could not absorb it and digest it. And that is the important thing about spiritual practices, is you need to be able to receive it and you need to be able to integrate it, to absorb it and digest it. And I've seen many practices, and especially, when I studied under Master Choa Kok Sui, right? super incredible energy, like you walk into the room and you're blown away by the energy field that this guy is generating, right? But most people were so overwhelmed by that energy in the class that they just couldn't grasp what he was saying, right? They would get burned out and they would get ungrounded because there was too much coming in. They couldn't absorb it, they couldn't integrate it. And so, even if you have somebody who has that level of energy, right, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a beneficial relationship. And so it's really about the student that is able to come into resonance with the teacher, to absorb and to integrate, to digest. So from my perspective, the initiation aspect is not the important thing. I find the most helpful thing is to provide the practices to the student and to help guide them through it so that they can experiment in a gradual way, because what they want to do is to start to have an experience where they're able to become aware of how the practice affects their energy, right? And when they do that, they're starting to guide the energy through the practice. And really, that's the essence of what an internal practice is about, is to develop the skills to become aware of the subtle energy and then to say, okay, how do I want to guide this, right? So it's really putting the student in the driver's seat, saying, okay, this particular practice moves the chi up and down the spine, right? So Kriya Yoga is very much like that. So then learning how to do that, learning the intention to do that, how to communicate internally and externally so that starts to happen and to develop some competency in it, right? The initiation is not the important thing, because if you blast somebody with sort of energy coming from you and they can't do anything with it, it's useless, right? Just like if you were to walk into a room with a megaphone and start talking to somebody with it full blast, they put their hands over their ears and they couldn't take the message. There isn't a real dialogue happening there. But if you just said to them, hey, okay, you sit down, like say, okay, let's just relax. Let's talk about this practice. Let's go through it slowly, right? Let's, and start to experiment with it and feel it, right? So that is really about what the essence of the teacher-student relationship is this: the teacher is trying to guide the student to start to experiment and to experience some of these inner changes. And as they start to develop, because everyone is unique, right, giving them support in their particular journey, their particular experience, right? So that's really what it's about. It's not just about saying, I initiate you and now you're empowered, right? Because I've seen so many times where people have been initiated into something, but they can't grasp it, right? They think that that's being empowered and they feel enthusiastic, but then they start to lose momentum because they haven't really developed the internal skills. And that's what we do at Modern Kriya. We help to develop the students' internal skills. They're building this ability to start to develop the skills of an internal process of meditation and inner transformation, right? So we're giving them particular techniques to develop skills, and then we're supporting them to apply those skills so that they start to get inner transformation with their own unique circumstances inside. Everybody's different, right? So if you give 5 people a particular practice, nobody's experience of it is going to be the same, right? Everybody's different. So it's a recognition that you're not trying to create a factory of spiritual adepts to push people through and say, okay, now you've reached level 4 and now you're level 5 and we're all the same. Everybody's spiritual development is unique. And so empowering the student, trying to support them, and them being in resonance with the practices is what makes the spirituality happen. It makes the internal transformation happen. So you help to facilitate that as a teacher. You don't just like say, hey, you're initiated and then my job is done, right? And as well, the idea, once one has been initiated, it becomes like a personality cult for that teacher, right? For that guru. And they're like, oh, guru, you have, removed all the impediments. No, that's not true. You as a student have, if you've applied things, if you've developed some skills and applied things in your life, you started to have internal change. You've been doing it. The teacher hasn't done anything. All they've done is to help to guide you and give you practices in a way that will help support you in your own internal transformation, which is different than saying, I empower you with an initiation. And the other thing about initiation is it's often used as a way to protect the trade secrets of a particular spiritual tradition. And we see this very much in Kriya Yoga, right? Where things are very secretive, because the idea is that if you're initiated, you're empowered by the guru, and then you do these practices, but you don't follow all the rules that the guru dictates because you're supporting their, their grandiose personality, right? Worshiping the personality. If you don't follow that, they say, I will disempower you. So any of those practices that I've given to you will no longer have power. So it really creates this sort of dependent relationship on the teacher, rather than to say, thanks teacher for teaching me this stuff, this is great, and I can go on my own and do my own thing, develop in my own way, live my own life, right? That kind of thing. That's an empowering approach, whereas the disempowering approach is saying, you are my student now forevermore, and you owe me, right, for what I have given to you, kind of thing, right? Like, it's just not, it's not conducive to one's development. So that relationship is not good. So we try to avoid that at Modern Kriya, to give you the practices that are going to help support your spiritual development. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine, right? But we know these practices work. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.